Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Now, Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Welcome to our podcast, where we bring you the most inspiring stories of entrepreneurs and experts in the software development industry. Each week, we interview successful leaders who share their unique journeys and valuable insights. I'm your host, Barry, and today we are lucky enough to have an amazing guest joining us, Handol Kim, CEO and co-founder at Variational AI. Hello, Handol. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Good morning, Barry. I'm doing fine.
Perfect. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. We know you're really busy, so we do appreciate you taking time out of your day for us. Now, for those people who are watching who don't know who you are or the company, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and the company that you work at, please?
So I am a co-founder of Variational AI. We are based in Vancouver, Canada, and we are a generative AI platform for small molecule drug discovery. And so we are a startup. We're about 18 full-time employees based in Vancouver as well as around North America. And we are a platform. We don't develop our own drugs. Rather, what we do is we use our platform to develop molecules and drug candidates that are then licensed to biotech and pharma companies. So in terms of my background, I actually do not come from a biological or chemical science background. Rather, I come from software and hardware and systems. So I've been working in the tech industry for the better part of 25 years or such, and here in Canada, as well as in the San Francisco Bay Area and around Asia Pacific, and in different areas from telecom, software to quantum computing, and pretty much everything in between, data center technologies and machine learning. And so the origin story of Variational is that we, the co-founders, we all used to work at a company called D-Wave Quantum, which is, of course, a quantum computing company. And they shut down our business unit because we were not quantum. We were probabilistic and generative AI, but they said, look, we need to focus on quantum. Be free and do anything you want, just don't do quantum. And we're like, no problem. And so we started Variational AI. And we started to basically try and tackle some of the hardest problems in molecular discovery and optimization. And so for me, it's been a learning experience. We started the company in September of 2019. And so I'm an immigrant to biotech, is an analogy that I use quite often. And it's interesting coming from tech and software and then going into sort of biotech. A lot of the words are the same, but they mean something different. And it's the 10% of the variance that kind of gets you, because you think you know what you're saying, but the other person hears something completely different and vice versa. And so, we come from a machine learning background, and we're applying, state-of-the-art actual machine learning science to the domain of drug discovery. So it's been an interesting journey. We've made a lot of mistakes, and we've made a lot of progress, and there's still a lot to learn, but we're already, well on our way.
So have you always had, this isn't your first company that you've set up. Have you always had an interest in being like your own boss and setting up your own companies? Or did that just kind of happen by happenstance?
Yeah, I know. I would say that I didn't grow up consciously wanting to start a business, mainly because my father himself was an entrepreneur, and I saw how hard it was. And, there's feast or famine in the household, depending on whether, the deal closes or not. And so seeing what he went through, I was like, no way am I going to do that. But then lo and behold, later on, I'd been part of a startup that was acquired, and I went over, and it was nice because, they paid me a nice salary and they kept me on, but they took away all my reports, and I was just overlay. And I think it was just like, whenever you want to go, Handle, you can go. And I kind of sat around and I thought, hey, you know what? I kind of want to start a tech company, because I've been involved in a lot of startups and also around capital formation and whatnot. And I thought, well, if I don't start a company now, I'm never going to start a company. I'm going to go to big tech and do this.
Yeah.
And so I decided at the age of 42 that, yeah, I'm going to start a company. And so I did that. And then it was the hardest thing I ever did. And so I ran that, startup successfully, like deeper into the ground over a period of 4 years. And I learned a lot. And so this is, I guess, my second startup. And I've made entirely new mistakes, but the obvious ones I think I've skirted. But I don't know if I have another one in me. The last one damn near killed me. So I think if this doesn't work out, I'll just go get a cushy job somewhere.
Famous last words, right? I
Yeah.
don't know if I can do another one. So, in terms of like variational AI, so maybe people who have more of a layman's knowledge of
Mhm.
like drugs and drug discovery, how
Right.
does your platform accelerate drug discovery in a way that traditional methods doesn't or does?
Yeah. So I guess to provide a little context for people who, because there are a lot of people who don't know how hard and difficult and long making an actual drug is. They kind of go like, oh, I go to the pharmacy and I'm prescribed a drug, and lo and behold, my eczema goes away. But the economics of drug discovery and development, and so discovery is kind of like I find this molecule, whether it's an antibody or a biologic or a small molecule. These are the two modalities, right? So when people say drugs, it can either be an injectable, which is usually a biologic agent, right? Or it can be a pill, which is a small molecule or chemical. And the majority of drugs are pills, but biologics make a lot of money as well, and they're
Mm.
relatively new modality. Large established drug companies started out probably doing industrial dyes or pigments or various industrial chemicals, and then hey, chemistry is chemistry, and we found out that this molecule has this wonderful property, and now we're a drug company. Whereas biology and biologics really is relatively recent, maybe 40, 50 years, where, hey, we can actually engineer biology in order to have some kind of therapeutic effect. So drug discovery is everything sort of like up until you file with the FDA, right? And so that means you're in sort of experimentation. Then once you file your investigative new drug claim, your IND, then you are in the clinic and you are now testing in humans. So phase one, phase two, phase three, et cetera, that we're all familiar with. It takes about 10 to 12 years to go from start to an approved drug. And the failure rate is extraordinarily high. So you've gone all the way through your preclinical, and then once you're in phase one and you're dosing humans, you average 10%
Mm.
rate of success, probability of success.
Wow.
And you've spent maybe hundreds of millions of dollars to get there. So it's the most expensive lottery ticket in the world. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that, and then when you're going through human trials, it costs even more money. It's like a billion plus, 2.8 billion, depending on how you account for it, capitalized versus non-capitalized costs, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an extraordinarily difficult and risky proposition. The industry that I think is the most similar to it is mining, where you kind of option a piece of land and you think you have these geologists who go, yeah, yeah, there's gold there. And so then they go and dig, and then they have to spend a lot of money to go and see if there is actually gold, and there usually isn't, right? And
Mm.
then so as a result, biotech is a very, very front-ended, risky proposition. But if you make it, you can have $1 billion molecule. For example, Merck, a customer of ours, MSD as they're known outside of Canada and the United States. They have the top-selling drug in the world, Keytruda. I think it makes like 20 to 30 billion dollars a year for them, just that one
Wow.
product. So
Mm.
so the stakes are very high. So what we try and do is we try and we're addressing the preclinical or the discovery phase. So really what happens is a biologist will go like, hey, I think that if we, activate or inhibit this protein or proteins, then it causes this sort of therapeutic effect based on sort of this mechanism of action. And they observe it in mice, maybe they observe it in, other animals. And there are these biologists that work in a lab for like 5, 10, 15 years. And finally they find this insight. And then they go, okay, now we need an agent that will, basically do what it is that we need. Either it's a small molecule or it's a biologic. And then they go to the chemists or the biologists and go like, hey, we're going to hit this. So make me, a small molecule in our case. Let's constrain to small molecules. They go to the chemists and they go, we need this. So go and make us this molecule. And then the chemists kind of go like, okay, so I need to create this thing. And where do you go? Where do drugs come from? Well, from the start, they come from the potential total space of all drug-like molecules. This is known as chemical space. And chemical space is this, theoretical space of about 10 to the 60 or 10 to the 63, just an absolutely terrifying number. Um, and so, there you go. These are all the potential drug-like molecules. Of course, most of them will kill you, but these are the ones that could possibly be drugs, as opposed to 10 to the 180, which is like all the molecules that could ever exist with the known atoms in the universe. So 10 to the 60. So where do you start? And 10 to the 60, we know the structures, these molecular structures. and the structure drives the function. But you don't know what the structure and the property relationship is until you actually make the molecule and then test it. And herein lies the rub. It is extremely expensive and takes a long time. So every time you are taking a molecule and making it and then testing it against a protein or whatnot, it's thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, depending on how hard it is to make. And then you get your experimental signal. And as a result, you can't just generate data and train your model for AI. Rather, the data is a byproduct of the discovery process. And so the amount of data that exists where we know the structure and the the property, maybe a few hundred million out of 10 to the 60. So what happens is, because it's so hard to have these starting points, Sir James Black, a Nobel laureate from 1988, who created rational drug design, he had and I'm going to paraphrase, but he said the most fruitful way to find a new drug is to start with an old drug. Because there exist these drugs, they're off patent or they've been patented, and you can see these. And so I start with that, and then I go, oh, this might be good for this target, but maybe I'm looking for another target. But at least this molecule is a good starting point. We know that it's not going to kill people. So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to try and change it. And that's what medicinal chemists and computational chemists do, is they change the structure of the molecule to try and make it, better. Maybe the previous molecule had a problem with clearance, like it would be absorbed, but you couldn't clear it, and it builds up in the liver, and that's not a good thing, right? Maybe it was too toxic. Or maybe it was just, it's covered by patent, right? And patenting is very, very important to drug discovery, because if you don't have a patent, you don't have a product, right? And so there are all of these different properties that you're trying to optimize, and it's very hard to do that. But what chemists do is they try and take these incremental sort of steps. And it's this step is known as the design, make, test, analyze cycle. So the chemist will design a molecule, they'll send it to a wet lab, they'll make the thing, and then they'll test it in an assay, and then they'll look at the results and go like, oh, okay, so we'll tweak this. So every time you do one of these DMTA cycles, it takes time, it takes money, and you have to do a lot of them. Because the problem is it's very difficult to hop from one area of chemical space doing each DMTA cycle. You're limited to sort of this beam-like, area known as sort of an applicability domain, right? And the moment you get out of this applicability domain, you're suffering from like an out of distribution problem, and your predictions are crap. As a result, when you do drug discovery, there's that exploration phase, and then there's the exploitation phase. And what I just described is exploitation. You've got a hit or a starting point, and you're going to try and exploit it, and you're very much constrained. The problem is in drug discovery, exploration is very, very hard. It's often so hard that people don't really explore. They start from a known starting point, or they start from a known active, right? Or what's known as a tool compound, which is some molecule that some, contract research organization created and said, here, you can start from that. But then once you start from there, you're very much constrained. You can't really explore chemical space. So really what we do is we enable efficient exploration of chemical space, and we do that through generative AI. And our thesis is this: if you do better exploration, it reduces the exploitation. And exploitation aligns with the lead optimization phase. So in drug discovery, once you've got your target, which is what the biologists do, then you have to find these hits, these initial starting points, right? And you'll do a screen, or you'll start with somewhere else. And then once you get a hit, which is some bioactive molecule, then you would turn that hit into a lead, which is like kind of drug-like. And then you have to optimize that lead so that it becomes actually a product. And then you would, push that into the clinic as a drug candidate. So that phase of lead optimization, where you're taking it from a lead and then turning it into a potential product and a drug candidate, that's the most expensive part of preclinical discovery, almost as or more expensive than a phase 1 human trial, right? And it's the part that's the most difficult. Basically, only half the programs actually survive lead optimization, and that's mainly because they ran out of money. And management goes like, okay, we've been doing this for 2 years, 3 years, that's enough, right? And so that's really where it starts. So that's the exploitation. So our thesis is that when you do more efficient exploration, right, you're starting in different areas of chemical space, you're going to get more novel chemical matter, and you're going to get closer to the molecule that you want. As a result, you can dramatically decrease the exploitation costs and the time of lead optimization, by doing better exploration. And currently there's not a lot of options when it comes to efficient exploration. So really, we kind of see ourselves as exploring chemical space. We're like, to boldly go where no, chemistry has gone before. And we do that through the power of generative AI, because very similar to, creating images using a diffusion model, where you've trained on a lot of labeled, images of like smiles, right? Like bajillion images of a smile with that label smile, and then, of a girl, of a red or bicycle, et cetera, such that if you prompt your diffusion model, whether it's Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or whatever, with, a smiling girl with short black hair riding a red bicycle over a bridge, it will create that image. And that image did not exist before. It's a novel image, and they're usually quite diverse, right? And so we really do the same thing, but for small molecules. But our prompt is the language of chemistry, because we've been trained on pretty much every single property of every molecule that has ever been patented, that has been published, that has been approved. And we use that experimental data to inform our generative model, which we call Enki, to create these new drugs. And that's basically, in a nutshell, how we do it.
Is there a way of measuring or validating like how the molecules generated by AI models actually work in like real biological systems, or is that part still unproven territory?
Oh no, that's the whole crux. We don't trust any prediction until we actually make the damn molecule and then test it in an assay. The experimental validation is the only thing that matters. There are a lot of sort of computational models and benchmarks and machine learning benchmarks and sort of chem informatics and whatnot. And when we started, we came out of the gate in 2019 with state-of-the-art results in molecular property prediction and optimization. And we delivered those results at NeurIPS in 2019. Back then it was called NIPS. But at NeurIPS, we showed, state-of-the-art performance, outperforming other labs. And we thought, yeah, this is going to be great. Like we've solved drug discovery, and boy, were we wrong. I mean, so computational models and benchmarks really don't mean anything in experimentally driven science, because here's the sad fact is that the data upon which you train is often shit. Can I say that? Or crap?
Yes,
right?
you can. Yeah, that's fine.
Very, very bad. Very, very, very poopy, as my kid would say. So you train on crap, then you get crap, right? And so really, the benchmarks that exist are somewhat informative, but you really can't bet the farm on it. And so as a result, we only trust experimental validation of the molecules, exactly in the way that you just said. We're like, okay, this looks good. The predicted values are awesome. Then you make it and you're like, ooh, that didn't work out. Or somebody's like, oh, let's try this. And like, wow, that's a real winner. So there's still a lot of, we're not perfect, and no one is. We get a lot closer, a lot faster to these novel, molecules that you probably would not have been able to find using status quo experimental methods.
Using your technology, are there like certain like diseases or therapeutic areas that you think are probably going to be more easily solved with the help of generative AI than others?
So because we're machine learning and we're not magic, right? We're not quantum computing, where you start with no data and then you model something ab initio, right? We're beholden to the amount of data. So the way to answer the question that you asked, which is a very good question, is we are indication agnostic, meaning there's no specific disease area that we focus on, because we often don't know what the disease drivers are, frankly. Biology is extraordinarily complex. And there are a lot of ways to skin a cat, right? So it could be that it's this protein for atopic dermatitis, but oh, what about this? And what about that? And what about, for maybe the key to curing cancer is using the body's own immune system. And then maybe it's immuno-oncology, or maybe it's just killing the damn cancer cell, right? So there are a lot of ways that you can do it. So we're not specific to a disease area. However, we are mechanistic in the sense that we focus on specific proteins, right? And in as much as that protein, there's a thesis, I mean, then it might work. So really, it's the domain of biology, and that's the hard part. Is biology is it's so damn complex that it's the cause for most drug failures, right? Is half the drugs because you chose the wrong target. It doesn't have a therapeutic effect on the disease that you're looking at. and because maybe it was something else that was causing it or some other sort of effect. So really, we're like, okay, we don't have biology. We're chemists and we're machine learning, and so the way you should think about us is we're like snipers, right? And we can hit anything. Just you have to tell us what to shoot at. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we're gonna shoot the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So and that's sort of the magic, and that's why we work with top flight biotech companies. They've done the work. They have these theses, they have studies, they have data around why inhibiting or activating a specific target is going to lead to a therapeutic effect and then, be a drug and help patients. And so we're happy to just kind of work with them.
With the recent breakthroughs in AI, are there any things that kind of excite you at the moment in terms of like maybe modeling predictions, or you mentioned like quantum computing, like maybe we're too far off away to get excited about that yet, but are there any directions where you kind of think, oh, do you know what, I'm looking forward to when we get to do this?
Working in AI, because our machine learning team, they're actual machine learning scientists, and they publish at the top conferences, and they're all PhDs in the related fields required to be a machine learning scientist, as opposed to most of the people who are sort of in AI for drug discovery within the field of chemistry. The vast majority of the people who are head of AIs or AI programs are chemists who've learned AI and they're practitioners, and so they apply AI to doing what they know how to do, but just better and faster, which is great, right? You can get a lot of benefit from that. But if you want true breakthrough AI to solve problems and that are not solvable today, our thesis is that you need true machine learning scientists. It's like we say to if there's a medicinal chemist and we go like, if you have a thorny biological problem, or are you going to ask another chemist or are you going to ask a biologist? They go, well, obviously I'll ask a biologist. So it's like, so this is an AI problem. Why don't you ask the AI scientists? And so it's difficult for pharma, it's difficult for biotech to get access to top flight machine learning scientists because they're all working at OpenAI or Meta or Amazon or whatever, because they don't want to work in bio because the amount of data is crappy. You don't know a lot of the stuff. So, I build this F1 engine, right? And now you want me to come in and make this engine that runs on crap and, like the data is all wrong. No, I'd rather do this, right? So it's difficult to get these people unless they're inspired by a mission or they're able to work in a team with their peers and really push that forward. It's not like an adjunct. You can't just bolt on a machine learning scientist in your chemistry or biology group and then just them and then go like, now do your AI magic. It doesn't work like that. You need a team and you need to be heavily integrated. So going back to the developments in AI, I continue to be extremely impressed and also worried about the growing acceleration of the pace of innovation. It's almost deterministic, and it's something that was inevitable. But as humans, it's very difficult for us to kind of contemplate the scope and the scale of change within a time scale that, we're used to it on the order of years or decades. When it's like weeks or days, it becomes like, oh my God. So I'm excited about the fact that we now, especially in sort of the LLM space and these large sort of frontier models, you have the ability to rapidly innovate, and it's just accelerating, and the ability to apply it in different domains is absolutely amazing. It's also scary. If I'm a law firm right now, how do I integrate this? Or I'm an accountant, or, luckily I tell my kids, like, don't go into accounting, don't go into law, don't go into various sort of areas. But at the same time, that's also very simplistic in the sense that, graphic designers in the 80s, when Adobe and the Mac came out, they were all scared that they weren't going to have jobs. But of course, they learned how to use the tools, and the industry adapts and changes. And all industries will adapt and change. That's just the way it is. But in our domain, what I'm excited about is the growing power of our models, but also a lot of really, really good work being done by various labs around the world, whether it's coming out of MIT and, the idea of AI for science is extraordinarily fascinating and compelling. It's going to be really hard. But it's great that there's so much money being spent pursuing, these approaches. It's great that so many smart people are working in that area. I think in terms of a practical impact on drug discovery, which is our domain, it'll be a while coming, even with the acceleration of AI. And that's simply because of the data limitation. And it's not like you can just train on trillions of tokens that you pulled out from the internet, the amount of training data, specifically in our domain of of chemistry, is relatively fixed. The amount of data that exists to train your model on, which is essentially a molecular structure plus its attendant properties measured in an experimental sort of fashion, and that corpus of data is already pretty small by machine learning standards, maybe millions of samples, and it only increases by a small percentage every year because, as I mentioned, the generation of data is a byproduct of the discovery process, not the end in itself. And then if you take all of pharma, and they have vast proprietary data sets, even if you were to take all of pharma together and add them up, it might be like, a few times more than all of the public amount data that exists.
Incredible.
Which means you can't use neural scaling laws as you do sort of in sort of LLM land or frontier land, right? You just hoover in all the data that you can, and when you have exponentially more, your model performance just increases. You can't do that in drug discovery because it's limited. So you have to really be more canny and thoughtful about how you use that data. And so really that's the differentiation. I think that you can't just throw in like millions more GPUs and like all of these, just build your model big. Because once you start doing that, you're starting to ingest data that is absolute dog crap, and it's just going to throw off your model performance. We know because we tried, so it doesn't necessarily work. But there are different areas and different data, sort of inputs that you can bring in that will help with the overall performance. I mean, Demis Hassabis from, DeepMind Isomorphic, Nobel laureate, and probably going to be Sir Demis Hassabis at one point, he'll be knighted, but tremendously, impactful person. But he made an offhand comment, kind of like, "Oh, we're going to solve all disease by X number of years." I don't remember how many years, but I'm just like, I hope so, but we'll see.
If you were a betting man, you'd bet against, right?
I mean, I'm not to be curmudgeon about it, but I mean, it's hard, right? It's extraordinarily hard, and it's precisely because of the whole complexity of biology, right? And maybe you have a therapeutic that does something really, really good. For 20% of the people, it's fatal, right? And maybe there's a biomarker that you can use and whatever. But like if it's going to have adverse effects for a significant amount of the population, your drug's not going to be approved, right? And it's going to be approved under very, very strict conditions. Or it could be that it leads to something else that's even worse, or these off-target effects and the therapeutic window, which is like the dose that's therapeutic versus the dose that's toxic. It's so narrow that no one's going to approve your drug, right? So there are a lot of things that are in there that are outside of the realm of machine learning and AI that really we can't solve, right? And we don't really have much of a say in. That gets better, and I do think that the health regulators and the authorities will kind of start fitting towards these innovations that happen, because at the end of the day, it's all about helping people get better from whatever disease and improving patient outcomes. So everyone's motivated to do that. And also, in the UK you have a national health system, and in Canada we have universal healthcare. Well, that's taxpayer funded. So it'd be great if it didn't cost so much money to make a drug, so that drug companies didn't have to charge so much. I mean, I think less than half the drugs that get approved actually make payback on the R&D costs. So people are like, "Oh, these evil pharma companies," but it's like, you have a limited period of time before your patent expires, and you got to make hay while the sun shines. Otherwise, you're running, a money-losing business, and that's not a good prescription, right? So short of like making all of drug discovery universal, and I don't think that's a good idea. When you have only publicly funded projects doing science for some benefit. I mean, I think capitalism and the ability to have people get a reward for success is the most efficient way of actually getting that success. So
There was so much information that you were extolling that we couldn't catch all of
Yeah,
it. So that's great. Handel,
yeah.
that's so interesting. Like, thank you. I've actually learned quite a lot today from you in relation to that. So thank you very much. We are slightly running out of time. So I
Okay,
just have one more question for you, if I may.
sure, sure.
You have had a lot of experience with like setting up and working for successful companies. If there's someone watching this who's in the early stages, maybe they want to be an entrepreneur, follow in your footsteps, what was the best piece of advice that you could give them?
So it depends on what kind of business you're trying to build, but it always starts with the problem. And the best validation outside of sort of deep tech, but in normal business software or devices or hardware, you're really trying to find that problem that someone will pay for. And the best way to validate if that is a problem that someone will pay for is to get someone to pay for it before you can build it. And so in software, you want to make sure that you have these customers that are giving you money. That is the ultimate validation. And building all this slideware and agonizing and navel gazing about if your product is right or not. And these are not new things. Lean startups, MVP, et cetera, all of this. But you know, but if someone is paying you money for the thing, even though it's just crap, and then you know what, you potentially found a good fit, and you want to do that. So go and when, especially when technical and product based founders, the beauty of the product versus like, is someone going to pay for it? So I think that people kind of go like, oh, if we make it good enough, it'll solve this. People will come running, and that's not a winning formula. For deep tech, though, where you really cannot sell a fusion reactor to someone before you actually make it, it's a lot more of a thorny problem. And the issue is that it's very thesis driven and very sort of fad driven, and things can change. Where clean tech and green energy and these things were like tremendously important until all of a sudden they weren't, and now it's defense and it's space tech. So you have to be extremely agile, and you have to love your vision. You have to have conviction around your vision, not to the extent where it'll take you to the grave. And you always have to be agile, because every single thing that you thought was going to be a killer is probably not. And what you end up building and the product that you end up selling is usually quite different than what you thought. And this romantic ideal of this entrepreneur who remains steadfast for decades and then finally gets their payout, these exist, right? It's just that they're by far the outlier, right? And so, it's great to think that you're this person, you have the sacred knowledge that only you have, and that at some point the world will come to your way of thinking. And again, it's usually not a productive way of doing it. You have to be flexible. And that's the thing I would say on the deep tech side, right? Because so many of the entrepreneurs are scientists, and in science, you kind of have to have that. I've just got to keep going. And so that's what that would be the advice I'd give.
Perfect. And what a fantastic way to end the session. Nice nugget of gold from you there. Handel, I want to thank you so much again for taking time to talk with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much, Barry.
That was Handol Kim, CEO and co-founder at Variational AI.